In China, being an expert is often a trap. The more you think you know, the more blind you become. Western business logic is built on answers, but Chinese business is built on questions. Welcome to the trap of the elite. Hexagram Meng. The useful folly. Literal meaning misted mountain. Silent code, the mental algorithm. It is not I who seek the use. It is the use who seeks me. In China, if you push for answers, you get lies. If you wait, you get the truth. Stop teaching, start learning. Let us decode why playing the fool is the ultimate power move in a high-stakes negotiation.
Have you ever walked into a room, sat down at one of those massive, heavy mahogany tables, and just thought with absolute, unwavering certainty that you were the smartest person there?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that feeling.
Right. You know it. You've done the reading. You have the spreadsheets, the pivot tables, the historical data. Your presentation is just flawless.
Bulletproof. Or so you think.
Exactly. You dictate the terms. Everyone across the table nods. They smile. You shake hands, and you walk out feeling like an absolute conqueror, like you did your job.
And then reality hits.
Yeah. Maybe weeks or months later, you realize that while you were talking, while you were so enamored with your own brilliant data, the entire room was quietly, efficiently, and completely playing you for a fool.
It is a profoundly chilling realization.
Yeah.
I mean, that moment, the illusion of control just shatters.
Oh, it's the worst.
And you realize the solid ground you thought you were standing on was actually quicksand the whole time.
It really is. And, well, today we are taking a deep dive into exactly that, the hidden mechanics of international trade. We are stepping away from the bright, sterile lights of the corporate boardroom and away from the, comforting predictability of Western contract law.
We're heading into the shadows.
We are descending into a much more ambiguous, shadowy space. We've got a really fascinating stack of material in front of us today, centered around an ancient concept called Bazi-ching Hexagram 4, the mentor algorithm and sourcing pitfalls.
Which is such a great title.
It is. And the deeper I got into this material, the more it felt less like a traditional business school case study and more like a noir thriller, almost.
Oh, definitely. It has that vibe.
It's about the catastrophic failures that happen when perfectly logical, data-driven rules cross borders, and they collide with the reality of where things are rarely what they seem on paper.
Exactly. This deep dive is fundamentally about a clash of paradigms. On one side, you have the standard Western approach to global business, right? It is rigid, it's standardized, and heavily reliant on contracts, compliance metrics, and, like you said, the illusion of absolute control.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, you have the reality of the Chinese manufacturing market, or really any deeply entrenched emerging market.
Sure, it's not just China.
Right.
Yeah.
And that environment is incredibly fluid, highly nuanced, and driven entirely by human relationships, unspoken obligations, and, well, rules that are never, ever written down.
Which is terrifying for a certain type of person.
Oh, it's a nightmare for them. And the tension we are going to explore today is what happens when those two immovable forces just completely collide on a dusty factory floor.
And I'll be honest, as I was reading through this, I found myself getting incredibly frustrated.
Really? Why?
Because I look at this from the perspective of a global auditor, right? Like the person whose entire career is built on risk mitigation.
Oh, I see. The clipboard warrior.
Exactly. I approach a supply chain armed with clipboards, standard operating procedures, and a heavy dose of righteous indignation when things don't go according to the perfectly formatted plan. I represent fiduciary duty. I represent the shareholders. I'm the good guy.
And from the perspective of someone who actually operates in that environment, the cynical, street-smart fixer sitting quietly in the back of the smoky room, that clipboard is exactly what makes you a target.
Wait, really? The clipboard makes me a target?
Absolutely. The fixer knows how the shadows work. They navigate the gray areas every single day, and they see right through the expensive corporate illusions that the auditor brings to the table.
So they're not intimidated by my spreadsheets?
Not even a little bit.
No.
They know that your spreadsheet doesn't manufacture the product. A human being does.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why do perfectly good rules that have been vetted by top-tier legal teams and proven to work in London or New York, fail so spectacularly when they hit a manufacturing hub in Asia?
Well, to answer that, we aren't starting with supply chain logistics.
Right, we're going way back.
Yeah, we are starting with an incredibly ancient philosophical lens. We're looking at the I Ching, specifically the fourth hexagram, which is called Meng.
Meng, M-E-N-G, right?
Exactly. It's an ancient concept, but its application here is incredibly modern. The core definition of Meng represents a state of being a student.
Okay.
It is the archetype of the youth, the inexperienced outsider, or, in the context of our deep dive today, the foreigner approaching a master.
And the master is the market itself.
Exactly. The master is the local market. It is the entrenched, incredibly complex, and largely invisible reality of doing business in a foreign landscape. So, Meng is a state of necessary ignorance.
And the material points out one central fatal mistake that outsiders make when they encounter this dynamic, like the ultimate trap that catches almost every major Western corporation at least once.
The mistake is the student aggressively acting like the teacher.
Which brings us to the most powerful image in this whole discussion. The state of Meng, this inherent blindness of the outsider, is described as the fog on the mountain.
It's a brilliant, visceral metaphor. Just imagine it. You, the corporate executive, the outsider, you arrive at the base of a massive, treacherous mountain.
Okay, I'm at the mountain.
And you've got your incredibly detailed map, your MBA, your corporate mandates, your strict purchasing guidelines, your capital.
We're well equipped.
Right. You look at the map, and it clearly shows a straight, logical, beautifully paved path right to the summit.
Sounds easy.
But when you look up from the paper, the entire mountain is shrouded in a thick, impenetrable fog. You literally cannot see 2 feet in front of you.
But see, this is where my auditor brain starts screaming.
I knew it would.
I mean, I don't care about the fog. I have the map. And more importantly, we aren't students begging for wisdom at the foot of the mountain. We are the buyers.
And there it is.
Well, we hold the purse strings. If we are bringing tens of millions of dollars in purchasing power to this factory, by the very definition of capitalism, we dictate the terms.
The golden rule, right?
Yes. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. We are the teachers because we are writing the checks.
And that, right there, is the expert trap. You just articulated it perfectly.
Oh, well.
It is the deeply flawed assumption that capital equates to omniscience. The fixer, the local factory boss, the regional supplier, they see this every single day.
We see the arrogant buyer.
Yeah. When the outsider arrives and immediately starts acting like the teacher, aggressively waving their map in the air and pointing at their bank account, they completely and utterly blind themselves to the reality of the mountain.
Because they think they already know everything.
Exactly. You don't realize that your map was drawn by a consultant sitting in an air-conditioned office in Chicago who has never actually set foot on this specific mountain.
Wow, okay. That hurts, but it's probably true.
By insisting you are the absolute expert, you close yourself off from the only people who actually know where the cliffs are hidden in the fog.
It's like walking into a high-stakes underground poker game in a foreign city.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
You don't speak the language, you barely understand this local variant of the game, and you haven't bothered to figure out who is sitting at the table.
Right.
But you try to dictate the rules of the house just because you brought the biggest stack of chips.
What's fascinating here is the money doesn't make you the master. It makes you the mark if you don't understand the terrain.
Mark, wow.
The local players, the factory owners, the raw material suppliers, the logistics coordinators, they are sitting at that table watching you loudly declare the rules, all while they silently, efficiently deal from the bottom of the deck.
Because they know the fog.
They know the fog intimately. They live in it. They know exactly which supply routes are currently blocked by local corruption. They know which raw materials just spiked in price yesterday. And they know exactly how to cut a corner so smoothly you won't notice it for 6 months.
And I'm just sitting there oblivious.
Totally oblivious. And if you refuse to acknowledge that you are blind in their world, they will happily let you walk right off the edge of a cliff. They will take your chips, and you will thank them for it.
Okay, let's move from the theoretical fog into a brutally concrete disaster.
Well, let's do it.
Because there is a case study here that perfectly and somewhat tragically illustrates this expert trap in action. I want to look at what happened on a factory floor in Ningbo.
Ah, yes. The Ningbo factory incident.
That's classic.
If you want a textbook example of the Western auditor violently colliding with the local fixer's reality, this is it.
So picture the scene. A British quality control firm representing a massive multinational retail brand with immense purchasing power arrives at a manufacturing facility in Ningbo, China.
Big players.
Lots of money.
And they don't just arrive. They arrive armed for corporate warfare. They bring with them a 500-page book of standard operating procedures, SOPs.
500 pages.
Every single detail, every metric, every conceivable variable has been codified, written down, and bound in this massive tome.
It's heavy. We are talking about exact thread counts, the specific chemical composition of the dyes, the precise ambient temperature the factory floor needs to be kept at, and the exact chronological order of assembly.
It is a masterpiece of Western micromanagement.
It is.
It is the ultimate shield of compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And what exactly did they do with this 500-page weapon?
They sat the Chinese factory owner down in his own conference room, and they lectured him for 3 full days.
3 days.
They went page by page through the SOPs. They explained exactly how the product will be made, exactly what materials will be used, exactly how the assembly line will be run, and exactly what the penalty clauses are if a single metric is missed.
Painful.
3 agonizing days of unrelenting, rigid instruction from the buyers to the supplier.
And let's look at the outcome, because this is the best part. How did the factory owner, a man who has likely been running manufacturing lines since these British auditors were in middle school, react to this 3-day instructional siege?
He nodded. He smiled warmly. He poured them tea. He agreed to every single bullet point. He signed every single page that needed to be signed with a very expensive pen. And the absolute second the British team packed up their briefcases, got into their black cars, and drove away from the facility. He secretly switched the raw materials to a cheaper, lower quality alternative.
The ultimate betrayal of the SOP.
The exact thing the 500 pages were designed to prevent.
But let's deconstruct why this happened. Because the cynic looking at this situation doesn't see a malicious, cartoonishly evil factory owner and an innocent, victimized British firm.
No.
No. The cynic sees a perfectly predictable outcome of profound arrogance. The nodding, the smiling, the eager agreement over tea. That is what we call a beautiful lie.
A beautiful lie.
Exactly.
Now, playing the auditor here, that term makes my blood boil because it implies a level of sociopathy. I mean, explain the mechanics of the beautiful lie. Why do it? Why not just say no?
Because the British firm was entirely in a state of Meng, but they were acting like emperors. They were completely blind to the local reality.
But they had a contract.
Their sheer arrogance, their absolute insistence on being the undisputed masters of a domain they did not truly understand, literally closed the factory owner's mouth.
Closed his mouth.
Yes. When you sit in a man's factory and lecture him for 3 days straight without asking a single meaningful question about his reality, you are not communicating, you are dictating.
I guess that's true.
You leave 0 room for feedback. You leave no room for the owner to say, actually, the specific high-grade polymer you were demanding in Chapter 4 is currently facing a massive, undocumented supply shortage in our province due to a local environmental crackdown. And if we are forced to source it, your margins will evaporate and we will both go bankrupt.
But wait, hold on. The rules are written down, 500 pages of them. It's a legally binding contract. Why sit there for 3 days and agree to them just to break them the moment the ink is dry? It completely defies standard business logic. If there's a problem with the polymer supply, you raise it in the meeting, you redline the contract, you negotiate a new timeline or a price adjustment. That is how business works.
That is how business works in London.
Well, yeah.
You're applying Western boardroom logic to a Chinese factory floor and assuming the underlying operating systems are exactly the same. They aren't.
So what was the lecture to him then?
To the local factory boss, that 3-day lecture wasn't a negotiation. It was a hostage situation.
A hostage situation.
Yes. The factory owner sitting there sipping his tea thinking, these foreigners are completely deaf. They don't want a partnership. They want a dictatorship. They don't want to know the truth about the supply chain. They want me to validate their spreadsheet.
Oof.
He knows that if he brings up the polymer shortage, the British auditors will just point to a penalty clause on page 312 and threaten to pull the contract. I mean, I cannot reason with someone who brings a 500-page book to a first meeting. So what is his most logical, rational move?
He gives them the beautiful lie.
Exactly. He smiled and nodded simply to get them out of the building.
Just to make it stop.
Yes. He gave them exactly what they desperately wanted to hear so that they would leave, the hostage situation would end, and he could get back to the actual messy reality of managing his margins, paying his workers, and running his business in the real world.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit terrifying from a risk management perspective. Their 500-page shield of SOPs, the very thing they spent millions of dollars developing to protect themselves, actually became the exact weapon used against them.
You blinded them.
It did. Their absolute reliance on that document made them incredibly lazy. They assumed the paper was reality. They thought that because it was written down and signed, the universe would magically bend to accommodate the ink.
Precisely. They substituted the illusion of standardization for actual understanding. They thought they had mapped the mountain, but they had just painted a picture of a mountain on a piece of paper and were staring at that instead of looking out the window.
That is a great way to put it. And if we extrapolate this out, think about the massive catastrophic risks here.
Huge risks.
That British firm probably flew back to London, popped champagne in the first-class lounge, and sent glowing, highly detailed reports to their headquarters. The Ningbo facility is fully compliant, we've locked in the parameters, risk is mitigated.
Well, the actual product is completely flawed.
Right. They are completely, blissfully unaware that the product rolling off the line and shipping in containers to their customers is fundamentally compromised. We're talking about massive brand reputation damage, potential safety liabilities, and huge financial losses.
All born from the beautiful lie they aggressively demanded to be told.
It's just wild.
It's the cost of arrogance. They tried to pave over a treacherous mountain with paper, and the mountain won. It always does.
So, to truly understand why this 500-page lecture failed so disastrously, like why the factory owner didn't just push back and negotiate like a Western supplier would, we have to introduce another layer of philosophy here.
Yeah, the rabbit hole goes deeper.
It does. There is a specific psychological concept that explains the mechanics of this failure, and it goes back to the Bazi-ching.
Yes, we need to talk about what is referred to as the first oracle rule.
The first oracle rule. It sounds incredibly mystical, but its application is intensely practical.
Very practical.
The rule dictates very clearly. The first time you ask the oracle, the answer is clear. The second and third times you ask, it is an insult.
It's a fundamental foundational principle of how one interacts with wisdom, or the master, in this framework. And remember, the oracle or the master here isn't some guy meditating in a cave.
No, it's the factory boss.
Right. It's the deeply experienced local factory owner who knows every inch of the supply chain.
Now, channeling my inner corporate auditor again, I am completely baffled by this concept.
I'm sure.
Because in Western business methodology, repetition is the very definition of rigor.
Trust but verify.
Exactly. You check, you double check, and then you send an independent third-party team to audit the checks. We have entire frameworks like ISO 9001 built on this exact premise.
Oh yeah, the endless audits.
Redundancy is how we guarantee safety, quality, and compliance. How on earth can verifying your data, making sure a supplier understands the requirements, be considered an insult?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look at the power dynamics and the underlying assumptions of the interaction.
Okay.
When you approach the oracle, or the master, you are implicitly acknowledging that you are in the fog. You are asking for their expertise. You are seeking their guidance through a landscape they understand and you don't.
Makes sense.
When they give you an answer, when they say, yes, we can hit this production target, and you immediately ask the exact same question again, or you write it down in 500 different ways in an SOP and make them initial every paragraph, what are you implicitly communicating to them?
Well, from my perspective, I'm communicating that the detail is important, but from their perspective, I guess I'm communicating that I didn't hear them.
It's much worse than that. Yeah, you are communicating that you fundamentally do not trust them. Or, equally damaging, you are communicating that you think they are stupid.
Oh, wow.
In a relationship-based market, asking the same question 3 times implies that you believe the first answer was a deliberate lie, or that the master lacks the basic competence to give a correct answer the first time. It is a profound, deeply personal display of disrespect.
I think I get it. It's like, okay, it's like going to a Michelin-starred world-class chef.
Okay.
You manage to get a table, you sit down in that restaurant, you order a highly complex meal, and then you walk back into the kitchen every 5 minutes with a clipboard to read them a recipe book on how to boil water.
Yes.
Just checking to make sure you know how the stove works, chef. Please initial here to confirm you understand water boils at 212 degrees.
Exactly.
Of course, they are going to spit in your food.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. Western standardization relies on constant, redundant verification. It is a system built entirely on a foundation of institutionalized distrust.
Institutionalized distrust. That's a strong phrase.
It's true, though. In the West, we say trust but verify. which really just means don't trust at all. We trust the process, the legal framework, the contract. We don't trust the person.
Right.
But in a market where the primary currency is human relationships, personal reputation, and mutual respect, bringing a massive system of institutionalized distrust into the room is highly offensive. It signals that you don't view them as a partner. You view them as a criminal who just hasn't committed the crime yet.
Wow. So applying this first Oracle rule back to the Ningbo factory, that 3-day lecture wasn't just boring for the factory owner. It was a sustained 3-day insult.
It was essentially the British firm insulting the Oracle hundreds of times over, page by page, bullet point by bullet point.
That is rough.
By detailing every single minute action, by stripping away any autonomy, they stripped the factory owner of any professional dignity. They treated a master of manufacturing, a man who controls thousands of jobs and millions in capital, like a disobedient toddler.
And in doing so, they completely destroyed any possibility of mutual respect, trust, or genuine partnership.
Exactly.
So the beautiful lie wasn't just about protecting his margins then. The switched materials, that was retaliation.
Absolutely. It was the Oracle shutting down. When the student insults the master simply stops teaching. They close the door.
And smile.
They smile, they pour the tea, and they let the arrogant student wander blindly into the fog to fall off a cliff. The switched materials were a direct consequence of the British firm demanding a reality that didn't exist, and insulting the only man who could have helped them navigate the real world.
You know, I want to pivot here because it's easy to just bash the Western approach, but we need a solution.
We do.
And having thoroughly explored the catastrophic failure of the rigid auditor, our deep dive now shifts to the opposing approach. There is a second case study here that acts as a blueprint for how to actually survive and even win in this environment.
Yes, we move from the British auditor with the 500-page book to the young Italian designer with a sketchbook.
The narrative calls him the naive apprentice. This young designer travels to China to get his new product line manufactured. But his approach is the polar opposite of the Ningbo incident.
Completely different.
He doesn't bring a 500-page SOP. He doesn't bring a team of lawyers. He arrives at the factory, sits down with the owner, and openly, explicitly admits that he knows absolutely nothing about local mass production.
He essentially says, I have a vision for this product, I have the design, but I have no earthly idea how this mountain works. I don't know your supply chains, I don't know your machines, I don't know how to scale this.
And he directly looks at the factory owner and asks him to teach him.
And the outcome here is the critical pivot of our entire discussion. The owner, feeling deeply respected by this vulnerability, opens up entirely.
No beautiful lie this time.
No beautiful lie. He reveals all the cost-saving secrets. He points out the hidden industry traps that usually snare foreigners. The Italian designer wins the game by intentionally acting foolish.
Now I have to push back here.
Okay, auditor brain, let's hear it.
Every alarm bell in my corporate auditor brain is ringing. That sounds like a terrifyingly naive strategy.
Okay.
You are walking into a fiercely competitive, often cutthroat manufacturing ecosystem, and you are just handing over the keys to your intellectual property. You are admitting weakness. You are basically begging to be taken advantage of.
Feels risky, sure.
If a CEO told his board he was using the acting foolish strategy, he'd be fired by lunch for a complete lack of due diligence.
I understand the panic. But this introduces the second major metaphor for our deep dive. And it explains why this is actually the most sophisticated risk mitigation strategy available.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's called the empty cup. It's an old Zen concept that applies perfectly to international trade.
The empty cup.
Think about the British firm. They came into the room with a cup that was already full to the brim, overflowing, really, with Western SOPs, assumptions, legal clauses, and arrogance.
So there was no room for anything else.
Exactly. When the factory owner tried to pour the reality of the market into their cup, it just spilled over the sides and made a mess. They couldn't absorb a single drop of useful information because there was no room for it.
But the Italian designer?
He arrived with an empty cup. He utilized what the cynical fixer would call strategic naivety.
Ah, strategic. That's the key word.
Notice the word strategic. He wasn't actually stupid. He was highly strategic in his admission of not knowing. He knew his design, but he knew he was in the fog regarding production.
Right.
By emptying his cup, by putting his ego aside, he created the necessary space for the master to fill it with invaluable ground-level intelligence.
Let's speculate on what that actually looks like on the ground, because I think people underestimate the value of that intelligence.
Oh, they definitely do.
The fixer persona knows exactly what kind of secrets are hiding in that fog. What is the factory owner actually revealing to this kid that the British auditors missed?
Well, the local market knows all the traps, things that would never, ever show up on an audit.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Like, the factory owner knows which raw material suppliers are currently cutting their product with cheap fillers to make quarterly numbers.
Wow.
He knows which specific shipping routes are experiencing massive, undocumented delays at the provincial ports because of a dispute with a local inspector. He knows the exact corners that the Italian designer's competitors are cutting to save a fraction of a cent, and how those cuts will result in the product failing after 6 months.
Things that a 500-page SOP couldn't possibly account for because the SOP assumes a static, rational environment.
Exactly. Audits only measure what you tell them to measure. But the reality of the supply chain is deeply fluid. It changes daily based on human factors.
So by admitting he didn't know.
By becoming the student, the Italian designer turned the factory owner from a potential adversary into his personal guide through the shadows. He didn't have to navigate the fog. The master just took him by the hand, pointed out the hidden landmines, and walked him safely to the summit.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Think about your own workplace, your own negotiations.
It applies everywhere.
It really does. It means sometimes the absolute smartest thing you can do in a boardroom or on a factory floor, or even in a complex personal dynamic, is pretend you're the dumbest person in the room.
It's weaponized humility.
Weaponized humility. I like that.
It is recognizing that vulnerability can be a much stronger shield than a legally binding contract.
Which leads us to the psychological underpinnings of why this works so effectively. Because it's not just about being a nice guy or being polite.
No, it's very calculated.
It's rooted in deeply entrenched cultural economics. There are two massive concepts that explain the hidden mechanics of why the Italian designer's success and the British firm's failure were almost preordained.
Yes, we need to unpack Mianzi and Guangxi.
Let's break those down because they are crucial. First, the psychology of Nianzi, which translates roughly to face, particularly in the context of teaching and mentorship.
Face is often misunderstood by Westerners as just reputation or avoiding embarrassment.
That's usually how I hear it used.
Yeah, but it's much deeper. It is a complex, quantifiable social currency. It's about dignity, prestige, and your specific social standing within a network.
Okay.
In the context of our manufacturing scenario, when the Italian designer actively asked to be taught, he wasn't just asking for a data dump of information. He was actively, publicly granting massive face to the factory owner.
He was elevating him.
Yes, he took this man, who is normally treated by Western buyers as a mere vendor, a replaceable cog in a global supply chain whose only value is his low unit cost, and elevated his status to that of a respected master and a mentor.
That has to feel good.
The psychological and emotional impact of that is profound. When you grant someone that level of face, you don't just make them feel good, you create a deep social obligation.
An obligation.
Yes, a true master does not let his devoted student fail. If the student fails, it reflects poorly on the master's competence. By making the factory owner his teacher, the designer essentially tricked the owner into taking personal, emotional responsibility for the success of the product.
And suddenly, the auditor in me is having a massive epiphany here.
I can see the wheels turning.
It's a terrifying one, but it makes perfect sense. If asking for help and admitting ignorance grants face and builds this protective social obligation, then the rigid, demanding compliance of the British firm did the exact opposite.
Precisely. They didn't just fail to grant face, they actively destroyed it.
Sitting a seasoned businessman down in his own factory and lecturing him like a toddler for 3 days straight, forcing him to initial pages proving he knows how to run his own business. That isn't just annoying.
It's worse than annoying.
It is an active, aggressive stripping away of his face in front of his own employees. It is deeply, profoundly humiliating.
And in a culture and an economic system where face is everything, where your reputation is your credit score, your insurance policy, and your legal protection all rolled into one, causing someone to lose face guarantees retaliation, it is an act of war. The beautiful lie, the switched materials, the sabotaged supply chain, that wasn't just about saving a few bucks on polymer. That was the factory owner clawing his face back.
Because he had to.
Exactly. It was his way of reasserting his power and dominance over the arrogant foreigner who thought a piece of paper made him a king.
Which brings us perfectly to the second concept, the environment where face operates. Guangxi. The material explicitly contrasts Western standardization against a Guangxi-driven market. What exactly is Guangxi?
Guangxi is often lazily translated as networking or connections, but again, that misses the depth.
It's more than just a Rolodex.
Much more. It is an invisible, deeply binding web of mutual trust, reciprocal favors, and long-term social obligations. It is the very fabric of how business gets done in environments where historical contract law might have been weak, unpredictable, or difficult to enforce.
So it replaces the law.
In the absence of a swift, reliable court system, Guangxi is the legal system.
So how does that conflict with the 500-page SOP? Because from a Western standpoint, the SOP is just a tool to ensure everyone is on the same page.
Standardization, the SOP, the audit, the rigid contract, is fundamentally an attempt to replace human trust with a rigid, impersonal system.
Right.
It explicitly says, I don't need to know you, I don't need to like you, and I certainly don't need to trust you, because this legally binding contract forces you to comply.
Which works in New York.
But in a Guangxi ecosystem, the contract is secondary to the relationship. If the Guangxi is strong, if the relationship and mutual respect are there, the contract is merely a formality, a piece of paper for the accountants.
And if it's weak?
If the Guangxi is weak or non-existent like with the British firm, the contract is just a piece of paper that will be ignored the moment you turn your back. And no local court is going to help an arrogant foreigner enforce it against a local employer.
I want to try to visualize this clash of systems.
Let's try.
It's like trying to navigate a bustling, ancient, labyrinthine bazaar where the locals navigate by the smell of the spice stalls, the subtle nods of the merchants, and a complex web of who owes whom a favor. But you refuse to look up from a strict Cartesian grid map that you printed off the internet.
That's a great way to look at it. The map isn't inherently bad, but it's the wrong tool for the environment.
Right. It's not that the factory owner can't read the SOP. It's not that he doesn't understand the Western metrics for quality control. It's that his entire business environment, his entire reality processes information, risk, and obligation through a completely different operating code.
A different operating system entirely.
You are walking into his world and demanding he abandon the social safety net of Guangxi for your sterile spreadsheet. It simply does not compute. It's incompatible.
This raises an incredibly important question for anyone listening to this. Are you trying to force your rigid, paper-based software onto a human system that runs entirely on relationships, nuance, and mutual respect?
Because if you are,
you will crash the system every single time. The system will reject you. The Italian designer didn't try to bring new software. He learned how to code in Guangxi.
That's brilliant.
He built the relationship, he granted face, he emptied his cup, and the system worked perfectly to protect and elevate him.
It is incredibly humbling to think about. I mean, we spend our entire careers, we spend billions of corporate dollars building these massive, imposing architectures of control, the airtight contracts, the compliance metrics, the key performance indicators, the third-party audits.
The illusions.
Right. We armor ourselves in data. We insulate ourselves with paperwork.
Because data feels safe. Paper feels controllable.
It does. It feels safe. It gives us the illusion that we have conquered the fog. But as we pull these threads together, looking back over this deep dive into Meng, the first oracle rule, and the fog on the mountain, the contrast is stark and undeniable.
Very stark.
The rigid global auditor, armed to the teeth with data and absolute certainty, walks straight into the fog and gets completely suffocated by beautiful lies.
They never even saw it coming.
They fail completely and often catastrophically because they fundamentally misunderstood their place in the dynamic. They tried to teach the master.
While the cynical, street-smart fixer knows that true, lasting power lies in the empty cup.
Yes.
They use strategic naivety not as a weakness, but as a crowbar to pry open the truth. They grant Mianzi, they build Guangxi, and by simply having the courage to ask to be taught, they unlock the hidden secrets of the market that no Western audit could ever possibly uncover.
It makes you look at your own professional life and even your personal life completely differently.
It really does.
I want you, the listener, to really examine the spaces you operate in this week. Where are you gripping your own 500-page SOP so tightly your knuckles are white?
Let it go.
Seriously, where are you aggressively dictating terms, whether that's in a boardroom negotiation, a project management meeting, or even how you deal with your partner or your kids? When the absolute smartest, most effective thing you could possibly do is put down the clipboard, empty your cup, and genuinely ask someone to teach you about their reality.
Where is your desperate need for certainty blinding you to the fog you're actually standing in?
Exactly.
It's the ultimate test of ego. Can you endure the temporary discomfort of looking foolish to gain permanent wisdom?
That is the million-dollar question.
And honestly, unpacking all of this leaves me with one final thought.
Oh, what's that?
Something that isn't explicitly written in our sources today, but echoes loudly through every single case study we looked at.
Oh, okay, I'm intrigued.
We've talked about how strategic naivety and intentionally playing the fool is the ultimate way to extract truth in a complex, opaque market.
Yeah. Where does that lead us?
Well, it makes me wonder how much of the global corporate hierarchy, the endless self-important board meetings, the confident slide decks, the aggressive executive posturing we see every day, how much of that is actually just a grand, expensive theater?
Oh, wow.
Like a stage full of people aggressively pretending to be the master, utterly oblivious to the beautiful lies they are being fed by the real experts hiding quietly in the shadows, just nodding and smiling until the meeting is over.
Wow. That's going to keep me up tonight.
Sweet dreams.
And with that, we'll leave you to ponder your own beautiful lies. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.